Welcome to Minnesota Global's webinar on building the Sustainable Development Goals into your mission. I would like to turn the webinar over now to Mark Ritchie.
Welcome everybody, and thank you so much to Dorsey, who's made it possible for us to move quickly, shifting to this virtual and online special seminar on the SDGs today. Our partner in this program is the Corporate Volunteerism Council of the Twin Cities. We'd like to get a brief welcome message from Caroline.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline DeVank, and I'm part of the planning committee for the Corporate Volunteerism Council. And for those of you that aren't familiar with our organization, we're a group of corporations and nonprofits that advocate, support, and grow workplace volunteerism. And we offer a variety of services, anything from networking to sharing best practices. We have special events and webinars like we're talking about today, and some professional development activities. So thanks again for joining today, and let's get the presentation started.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the other organizations who were so helpful in promoting today's seminar: United Nations Association, Global Solutions, the German American Institute, Minnesota International NGO Network, and the SDG Roundtable. Our speaker this morning, I've had the pleasure of working with over the last few years. Irena Zubcevic is the Director-in-Chief of the Office of Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development, often called UNDESA. And in that role, she is the coordinator for the High-Level Political Forum. It's the part of the United Nations that coordinates and puts the work of all the governments and civil society and other organizations together each year, the week after our July 4th, to keep this process moving forward to our goal in 2030. I've had the pleasure of working with her since being part of a process in an organization called Impact 2030, which brings together corporations at a national and global level around using volunteerism to help achieve those sustainable development goals. Irena has a special connection to Minnesota. When she was working in the Croatian Foreign Ministry, our former Governor Perpic was part of that foreign ministry for a while after he left office here in Minnesota. Irena, thank you again for being part of our seminar this morning, and I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I would like to thank you, Global Minnesota and the Corporate Volunteerism Council for this opportunity. I'm really honored to be here this morning and to speak to you. And as Mark has said, I really do have a special connection to Minnesota, and I'm really have been privileged and honored to have been working with your former governor. So without further ado, we'll start with my presentation, and I have divided in a kind of three ways. So I will start first with something what the UN is doing and what kind of a framework the United Nations has been providing for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. And then I will talk about why we believe, through our experience working with a number of private companies and business sector, why SDGs make a very good business proposition. And then in the end, I will talk about some very concrete things, what can be done, and a number of initiatives that already exist. So you can see here that what is like a motto of the 2030 agenda, and this is that we can be the first generation to succeed in ending poverty, and also the last to have a chance of saving the planet. And I think this is something we really need to bear in mind. Also, we have our UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who is always very open to business and is doing a lot of effort to include business in the work of the United Nations. And this is what he said about the businesses, that they need to unite behind the science by taking rapid and ambitious action across their operations and value chains. And I think this is something which is we also need to bear in mind. Next slide. Why is the 2030 Agenda transformative? You can say that, and those of you, I'm sure, who have been working with sustainable development know that sustainable development has been around for many, many years. But why is the 2030 Agenda now something which everybody's talking about, and the Sustainable Development Goals? Which a lot of people call global goals, which is fine, but I like sustainable because the global goals don't have the sustainable part in them. So why is it transformative? Because it's universal and indivisible. So this agenda is equally applicable to, let's say, U.S., who is the richest country in the world, and to the poorest countries in the world. So it's really universal. And what is in the 2030 Agenda? It's indivisible. Why? Because it unites the three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, environmental, and it's not making just a progress in one of the dimensions, but in all three of them. It's also intergenerational, and I'm sure you know that the most widely accepted definition of sustainable development is that it should use the resources to fulfill the needs of the current generation, but also the ones of the future generations. So this intergenerational solidarity and equity is very important. And then it's also inclusive because it pledges to leave no one behind and to reach the furthest behind first. So that's why it's also looking at how society has to be more inclusive, how economic benefits have to be shared, and that all of this has to be done within the caring boundaries of the planet, and using sustainably the natural resources that we have at our disposal. It's also including the whole of government and whole of society approach, which means that it is really permeating all parts of our lives, and that's why it's the agenda for everybody. So it's for all of us, starting from ourselves to the highest ranking officials in the government, in the businesses, and in other walks of life. And then I also already talked about the three dimensions, so we can go on. Next slide. And as you know, just to remind ourselves, I know you are very familiar with the SDGs, and you have a lot of things going on there. It's just to remind us what are the characteristics and why they are also transformational. And that will also explain later on when I talk about why we need to make transformational changes and why it's important. And if you look at the overall 17 goals, you will see that they talk about realizing human rights, achieving gender equality, empowering women and girls, but it's also about the integrated and indivisible nature that I already talked about. So we need to balance the three dimensions of sustainable development. And they are simulating action. They are giving a framework for all the critical areas of the human existence and of the planet. Next slide.
Right.
This is just an example of to show more visually how all these goals are interlinked, and then if you make a progress in one of them, then you will make a progress in other of them. I like this one especially because it shows you what are the most important areas where sustainable, where you can make a difference in sustainable development. Because if you look at if you look at the words here, you will see energy, resource efficiency, infrastructure, transport, resilience, agriculture, water, and so on. And this is something which is very important because investing in sustainable development is a long-term proposition, and investing especially in these areas would be specifically beneficial and would drive the agenda forward. Next slide. And of course, we need in order for the agenda, 2030 agenda, and the Sustainable Development Goals to be implemented, we of course need the means of implementation, and that is why the what we call the Addis Ababa Agenda, Action Agenda, is something which is giving the ways and proposing how all this can be implemented and what would be the resources to be used. So you will see here that I have taken out only the parts that are the most relevant for business, and these are the things that will also, I'll talk a little bit later on, why it makes a good business proposition to implement Sustainable Development Goals. And basically, what these, I'm not going to go to read all through of them. You have them on the screen. You will see that what is important here is basically having the kind of risk sharing that can be that is very important for private investment. And the ways how it can be done, and you have some of the proposals on how the ways that can be done, that you can have models of combining public and private resources, and there are some examples of how it can be done, and that has already been done. For example, green bonds is something that a lot of companies have already started doing and has been around for a while now. But there are also other ways of doing it. Of course, high quality disaggregated data is really important for the implementation, and private sector data is very important, and it's something that at least I feel is still not utilized enough, but it should be. And the important thing is that the public sector cannot do things alone, and that it needs private sector, it needs business sector, but really needs them as a partner, not just as a donor, as a source of the financing, but really as a partner doing these things together and feeling this kind of a bond that has to be between public and private sector in order to drive the agenda. And you can go ahead. Now I'm coming to this, is why adopting the SDGs is a good business decision. And we all know this gentleman here on the right, and who gave us a very nice, at least it is said that he said it, we don't know, but most likely he did, the definition of insanity. So, which means that we cannot continue doing things the same way, because otherwise we will have the same results. So business as usual is not an option. So this is why what we need to bear in mind, and that's what when I talked about the transformational agenda or 2030 agenda. This is exactly that. So the business as usual cannot go on as it was. So successful businesses of today will be those that meet the needs of as many people as possible, utilize as few resources as possible, and engage in meaningful dialogue with their stakeholders. So this is something which we have to bear in mind, that the businesses are also changing, and that the businesses, these are the businesses of the future. So if you look at the using as few resources as possible, and meeting the needs of people, you know that I'm sure that the public today is much more educated and is much more informed, and wants to have a say where the money that they are investing, where they want it to go. So having a meaningful dialogue with the stakeholders is an essential part. You can go ahead. Next slide. And so here you have some of the things which I have just told you about, but reconfirming that what is the 2030 agenda and the connection to the business and private sector. As I already said, the 2030 agenda looks at business as partners in implementation. You have, for example, in your area, you have companies like Cargill and Medtronic. They have been engaged with UN. There is at the UN there is a business forum that happens every year. The CEOs of these companies were part of that, and also Medtronic is one of the companies that. As another good example, there is a company which is called Catalyst, which you might heard of. It's an organization that looks at the fair equity and gender equality in the workplace. And Medtronic has been awarded this year the award as one of the most inclusive places in the world. It shares its award also with Unilever and Deloitte. Going on, acknowledgement is what is important is that there is a diversity in business, and this is something more for the public sector to understand, because those of you who are working in business sector, you know that. But it's also important for the policymakers, for the public sector to understand the diversity of the private sector. And also, what is important is also the global partnership. Which means everybody should be engaged, which I already said, the whole of society, the whole of the government, all the citizens, and that includes, of course, the business sector and the private sector. And then also what is important is that that private sector activity is really important in investment and innovation. And they can also, through that, drive productivity and strive toward inclusive economic growth and job creation. And we have a very good example in your corporate volunteerism council that is supporting this as well today, where volunteers really show and they mobilize the whole communities and raise awareness of the SDGs and the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Next slide. Right. So these SDGs and here is some of the things which show how SDGs and businesses can be mutually beneficial. And let's be clear about how hard this is. There are formidable barriers in the way. There are still far too many companies failing to deliver in areas like anti-corruption, paying a fair share of tax, meeting basic transparency standards, eliminating child labor, paying a living wage, or ensuring equality of opportunity for women and ethnicities. So this is exactly what the SDGs are a good framework for, because achieving the SDGs would create a world that is sustainable. And we already talked about these 3 dimensions. So this is what the world should be like if the SDGs are really implemented by everybody. But also they present a viable model for long-term growth strategy for businesses and also for the world economy, and to shift businesses to long-term perspective. And that is what is important, and I already said that this long-term perspective is for sustainable development is important, because sustainable, we have the horizon now with the 2030 agenda, the 2030, but sustainable development already a lot of scientists and researchers are looking at the 2050 and even beyond, even to 2100. So this is a long-term proposition. But what is important is that businesses need to move towards the SDGs together. Of course, there are always those who are going to be pioneers in this area, and I have mentioned some of your companies that are doing that. But it won't happen on the scale large enough unless everybody is engaged. And also, I showed you this interactiveness of the SDGs. So progress on them will also have impact on the other ones. So so it's very important to look how these interactions work. Next slide. What I wanted to say is also that in the for private investors and businesses, achieving the SDGs will require a shift towards long-term investment. So that I want to underline again. And this demands aligning private and public incentives with sustainable development and better measuring the impact on sustainability. So so you will see that for global demand for new infrastructure, which is really a basis for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we have some information from McKinsey, which needs the estimate of $50 trillion of the world's existing stock. So literally, if this is which means that we would need about $6 trillion on average per annum, and this really would mean that we would literally need to rebuild the world over the next 15 years. And then let's go to the next slide to look at the barriers. So this is the vast scale of what is needed needs to be combined with fiscal constraints in the public sector. And so the private sector financing will be crucial for achieving the SDGs. So this is just another way of saying what I already said that. And looking at what the corporate institutional investors could provide is between $1 trillion to 1.5 trillion in additional private capital for sustainable development projects, which means up to half of the annual investment gap. And such investments promise to multiply economic and business opportunities, but will also happen only if several structural barriers and market inefficiencies are currently that are being in the way are being removed. So this is important to show what these barriers are. So coming to these barriers. Next slide. Yes. So some of these barriers, as you can see, is poor transparency, a lack of scale, shaky operating models, corruption, taxes, and regulations. So it's really important that we are aware of these barriers, and that is why it is important to adhering to a number of principles to overcome these barriers. And we can go to another one which talks about other barriers. Next slide. So one is the existing business models can stop incumbents from seizing sustainable growth opportunities. So these are the internal obstacles. So that means that we really need to change the existing business models, and that's what we were talking about, the transformation. Also, regarding the capital market, incentives for investment in sustainable development are still weak and short-term oriented. So we talked about the importance of the long-term investment in sustainable development, and also the policy setting. So it's really important to have the policy signals that would drive the change, and that would not. That would not prevent looking into the social and environmental externalities, which is a very important part of that. And that means that you have to have a policy coherence and also to look at the trade-offs. And then, of course, in the market conduct, cost pressure can create a race to the bottom on labor and environment. So, in order to overcome these barriers, what would be important is to have certain principles. And I have here, you have 3 examples. Some are the principles and some are the ways of doing things. So one of them is the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. And I'm sure many of you have been engaged with the UN Global Compact. and even if you are not part of the companies that are part of the UN Global Compact, these 10 principles really make they really make a good sense because they deal with human rights. They deal with materiality, and also the need of the ways how to deal with anti-corruption and how to deal with environment. So it would really be good to look at these principles and see how your companies can adhere to these principles and how they can make good sense for what you are doing. We have another one. Next slide. Is the environmental, social, and governance issues, and this is something, the principles for responsible investment. These principles have been around for a while, but what is important for them is that they are looking at the three important ways of dealing with the barriers, and this is one is environmental, and of course this is what they looking specifically are climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, resource depletion, and waste and pollution. And then from the social point of view, their working conditions, and also how local communities are different in a way that local communities differ from one another, and I'm sure you are also aware of that working at your community levels. Health and safety, and then also employee relations and diversity. And we have, as I just mentioned, Medtronic who received this award for diversity. So you are basically doing this already. And then what is important is about the governance. And that is to looking at the executive pay, and then on the areas of bribery and corruption, board diversity and structure, and also the tax structure. So these 6 principles basically would want to support the issues in these three areas. And then moment. So we go to an initiative, Impact 2030, which is very, I understand you are very familiar with, and you have the basic belief of the Impact 2030 and why it was established, and that is when companies join forces and use the skills, expertise, and creativity of their people as a force for good, they can change the world. And so there are a number of things that can be done, and these are the main things that what they are trying to achieve and to do, and they are looking at the inspiration, thought leadership, and recognition, and let me just, excuse me, just for a second. So, so what is important is that the forward-looking business leaders and working with sector peers and stakeholders, they need to map the collective route for sustainable development and for a competitive playing field, and identify tipping points and prioritizing. No, please, can you go back? So this is very important to show this in the impact and in whatever you are doing, and also what is important is to have the regional impact councils and impact champions for international development. And what is really important is I was impressed how how many very important and high-level business CEOs, entrepreneurs are using their knowledge and skills to help developing countries through the work with them. And what is also important is to have a unified framework and protocol to measure the contributions, outcomes, and impact of human capital investments on the SDGs. So I think that something which is important and which maybe often public sector doesn't understand is how important it is to look at the impact of what is being done for the business sector. Now you can go ahead. Then there are also some other guidelines. So these are the due diligence, which are guidelines. They have already been in place for a number of years, much longer than the 2030 agenda. It actually started in the 70s. But what has really been done is that they have this network of national contact points who promote effectiveness of the guidelines and contribute to the resolution of issues that arise from the alleged non-observance of the guidelines. So they are very good when you are working with the communities and when you need to look at the impact that the business might have on communities. They take into account human rights, environmental stewardship, responsible production and marketing, and also end-of-life strategies and disclosure. And they are working with a number of stakeholders. So this kind of due diligence can really improve and do a very good strengthen the relationship with the communities where the business is being done. Next slide. So here are some of the actions that we have observed and looked at what can be good to build support for the global goals as the right growth strategy. So you have some of the things that can be done, from incorporating goals into company strategy. So what we feel is important is that sustainable development goals are not just paying a lip service to them, but really to become a business model for a company. And also the right transformation to sustainable markets with sector peers. I already said what is important is really that the whole sector, that the whole of business moves towards the sustainable development goals. And also to work with policymakers to pay the true cost of natural and human resources. We have a lot of examples of the green counting and also the ecosystem evaluation services. So it's really important to have this kind of policies that can look at that as well, and then push for a financial system oriented towards a longer-term sustainable investment. So this is exactly already what I have said, that the sustainable development means long-term investments. And then, of course, rebuilding the social contract, and I just said about the due diligence, which is one of the good ways how it can be done. Next slide. And so here is an example of the ways how it can be done. The company strategy. So how you can apply from the whatever you are doing through the SDG lens, and then also work with everybody to drive the sector change, and then help government and regulators shape policy that advances the SDGs and embed sustainability to create value. And here are some of the actions that can be done to do that. And if you look at those principles that we have just gone through, and those actions, you will see that basically they are being mapped through that. Next slide. So now we are talking about the rebuilding the social contract. And here are some of the actions that can be done. And if you look here, there is the actually the source is here is lacking, but it's just a moment. It's the Edelman, I believe, or maybe it's McKinsey. But I'll give you a source on that. But when you look at it, you will see that the percentage of trust in each sector, and this is the latest one from 2020. I'm just trying to find the source of that. That's fine. I'll get to that. So it's very important if you look at the actions to implement UN guidelines on human rights, ensure decent working conditions, pay tax transparently, prioritize progress on gender in workforce, and influence policy responsibly, transparently, and accountably. So this you will see how the decline in sectors are in technology and entertainment are leading the pack. But you will also see that there are some other sectors in which the trust has declined. So it's really very important to have this social contract and to build this trust. Next slide. Okay, so now we are coming to the new business models with the SDGs. And if you look at what is here on this slide, you will see that I have already talked on a number of these things through going through all these principles that would make sense and would increase the sustainability and using sustainability as the core of whatever the company does. And they open new opportunities, and there are also a lot of the efficiency that can be gained. They drive innovation, and they also enhance the reputation because, as I have said already, that a lot of those people who are investing the money, they want to know in what this money is being invested, and consumers are also much more aware of the importance of sustainability in the product that they might be buying, using, and so on. So these are so incorporating the SDGs into company strategy and use whatever you are doing, using through sustainability lens would also mean appointing board members and senior executives to prioritize and drive this execution, and also to aim at strategic planning and innovation at sustainable solutions, and marketing products and services that inspire consumers to make sustainable choices, and using the goals to guide leadership development, women's empowerment at every level, regulatory policy, and capital allocation. And this is very important to bear in mind. And one of the things that can help that is what we call a national financing strategy, which promotes lateral coherence between different public and private financing policies and instruments, and it can support prioritization of financing policy actions and dialogue between state actors and private sector. So if you go to the model of the next slide. Right. So these are the building blocks. So you will see that what I've just said, that is very important that you have the governance and coordination in place, but also that you need first to assess assess and do the diagnostics. Then you go to financing strategy, monitoring and reviewing, and then governance and coordination. So you will see here that this financing framework has as an important part of it monitoring and review. Because monitoring is important because we need to see the impact and the results that we are doing, but also review is part of accountability. And the governance and coordination develops institutional mechanisms and coordination tools, because for sustainable development it's really very important to have policy coherence and to have the trade-offs. Next slide. one of the things that follow up and review to see where we are globally and around the world, that we have it at the UN, and it's the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. Every year it meets in July for 2 weeks, and countries, but also other stakeholders, including business sector. I already mentioned there is every year a business forum reporting on what businesses are doing to move to sustainable path. And I already mentioned that Cargill and Medtronic have already been part of this business forum. And we are hoping that you might also, hopefully this year, also have this business forum, and that many more companies from your area would come and engage with their counterparts in other parts of the world. Next slide. And yet we need to, this is some kind of a reality check, unfortunately, and there are a number of prognoses depending on containment, how the COVID-19 will impact the businesses, and I'm sure that it's on everybody's minds today. And this is from one of them is a McKinsey, but there's also INC is another one. There are quite a number of sources that are working and trying to get some prognosis on when this pandemic can be contained, and depending on how proactive we are, it can be. There one is the second one prognosis is second quarter of 2020, and the other one is the second quarter of 2021, which is a big difference. So importance of coordinated response by companies and within companies is really important, and it's also essential to give sense of common purpose to employees and to engage customers. And time to do the stress test to financial and stabilize the supply chain. So I think these are the things that companies can be doing themselves, and these are some of the recommendations that have come from these different sources. And I'm sure that we all need to, unfortunately, now calculate this impact into whatever we will be doing. And yeah. And finally, I have put together some initiative and resources that you have seen in previous slides. That you can become part of if you are not already. I know a lot of you are working with the UN Global Compact and Impact 2030, but you have also some other initiatives. For example, SDG ambition is one of the initiatives of the Global Compact. Because, as you might know, at the SDG summit in September last year, the member states of the UN, but also other stakeholders, have adopted a decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. And this SDG ambition is there to raise that level of ambition, because the realization was that we are not on track in achieving SDGs by 2030. So we need to step up this ambition, and we need everybody on board. So this is one of the things that you can also become part of. There is also UN Business Action Hub, which is a platform where the UN and business can engage in dialogue, share information, and take action to advance UN objectives and the SDGs. There is also a Business and Sustainable Development Commission, which is more like of a think leadership, which is, and you have the email. Mark Malloch-Brown, who was a long time leader of the UNDP, and he has done a lot of work in the area of development. So he's one of the co-founders of this commission, and it's a useful source. I have talked about financial inclusion strategies. There are a number of initiatives that are working with these strategies. you have Alliance for National Inclusion, Global Partners for Financial Inclusion, Women's World Banking, Better Than Cash Alliance. So all of these different initiatives are organizations that are working on how to achieve financial inclusion, because financial inclusion empowers all people. There are some which are specifically directed to women, like Women's World Banking, but also there are others. So. And then, of course, you have the guiding principles on business and human rights, which have been put forward by our UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And then you have all those other principles that I have already mentioned from OECD and PRI and UN Global Compact. And this is where, so this is, next slide. So this is the one last look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and also 17 of them. And I'm be very happy to answer any questions or hear any comments from you, and very happy to connect with all of you. I hope that my presentation will be shared. You have links in my presentation, so you can click on them, and they can put you to these different sources. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irena. We've gotten a couple questions, but also Edelman Trust Barometer is apparently the source for the trust percentages on some of the slides. But also we want to assure you that this PowerPoint will be made available. A couple of people have asked that question, so yes, it will. So here's one question that I think many on this call may have on their mind. How do the best companies communicate internally on the SDGs? Are there some toolboxes or train the trainer or other materials? Or what's your advice from the best companies about internal communications on the SDGs?
Okay, so I think that the communication in principle is the key for any company, and creating what would be important if the company really does everything through SDG lens. Then the communication is actually, whatever they are doing, would be SDGs would be part of that communication. If you are in a place where you would need to do some convincing of the company leadership and also the company employees, then I would think that creating maybe SDG hubs, or creating some training material, and having either in-person or online webinars where you would present these things and showing why the SDGs make a good business proposition, and why it would be important to have SDGs as part of the business plan of the company, then that would be the way to go. So having maybe some training material and educating people through webinars or in-person training. Also, what would be good is, as you mentioned, training the trainers is another possibility. So you can have some of the if you have a position in a company of a sustainability officer or sustainability director or sustainability VP, depending on the company, they can be the source of the latest information and latest development, and they can then train different parts of the companies if they are, for example, dealing with supply chain, if they are dealing with policies, if they are dealing with advocacy, so if they are dealing with marketing, so they can train different teams. But what I think what would be what is the value added, I think, of the sustainable development as such for a company is that all the teams need to work in tandem, because in companies very much at least as what I have seen and experienced when I'm advising the companies, on sustainability is that they are still working very much in silos, very much as the governments do. So it's difficult for these silos to be broken. And there was a very good in one of the conferences. I heard the expression dancing silos, which means that you would still need the expertise that needs to exist in each of these streams of work. So you would still need communication specialists. You would still need experts, technical experts. You would still need policy experts, advocacy experts, marketing experts. But at the same time, they would still need to be flexible enough to be working together with others to achieve this policy coherence and to look at everything you are doing through the SDG lens.
Thank you. Let me shift gears. We've just got a few minutes left, and I want to get a couple more questions. Here's one. How does business address these policies in the poorest areas of the world?
What are the policies?
The sustainable development and the ESG policies. I think the question is, it's one thing to imagine those policies in the richest part of the world. How do companies ensure coherence with their policies and actions even in the poorest parts of the world?
Well, I mean, this is something which comes to what we are talking about, these principles that each company has to adhere wherever they are, even if they are in the richest or in the poorest. So, and this is really something which is building the reputation of the company. Because if you have a company that is, let's say, a multinational, and if this company has one set of standards if it operates in the U.S., but has another set of standards if it operates, for example, in Burundi, then it really is not a good thing. So the company should have a unified policies wherever they are. Whether they are operating the richest or in the poorest country. And that is why you have all these principles, and also doing the due diligence and being transparent and doing your part on the governance side, and adhering to human rights, to decent work, to labor standards. That is very important. So that's how companies build their reputation and their trust. Because if they do adhere to these standards in the rich country, because there are a lot of checks and balances there, but they don't do that in the poorest countries because there is not enough checks and balances for them, and they don't have enough capacity. That's not a good thing. So we need to really to strive, and I think consumers and the market really needs to look into this and do not and really point out those companies that are doing well in these areas and really promote these companies. But as I said, we need the whole of the business sector to move into that direction. Thank you.
One thing that's asked by a couple questioners is the using of SDG 5, gender equality, as a standalone. Is it also a social component of the other SDGs, and what's the thinking behind having it standalone, and what are some companies doing to really address gender equality, SDG number 5?
Okay, so I remember, because I was supporting the negotiations on the 17 SDGs, that there was a lot of discussion exactly on that, whether SDG 5, gender equality, should be a standalone SDG or it should be a cross-cutting thing that would apply to all the goals. However, at the end of the day, what prevailed was that there should be a dedicated SDG on gender equality, because that would allow measuring how the gender equality is being implemented. But because the goals themselves are indivisible, and there is not one goal that is more important than the other, and they are all interconnected, the gender equality, of course, is part of any of the goals. For example, if let's say you take SDG 1 on poverty, I think it's self-intuitive, is really that if you don't have gender equality, you will not eradicate poverty, because if half of your population is not being educated, is not being part of your workforce, then the poverty will persist. The same thing as with other SDGs. So yes, it is a cross-cutting issue, the gender equality, but at the same time, it is a specific goal because it was felt that in that way it will be measured better. Disaggregated data is something which is very, very important for gender equality. And there are a lot of companies. I just mentioned how Medtronic got the award for building places that are inclusive and that look at the gender equality. So there are a lot of companies who are looking at that, but it has to go throughout the companies, because studies have shown that companies, when you look at the pyramid at the bottom, there are quite a lot of the gender parity, but then as you continue towards the top, there are fewer and fewer. So really looking through the lens of gender equality also in the boardroom, also in the management positions is very, very important. So it's not just looking at overall at the company as such and saying, oh, we have, I don't know, 50% or 30% or 20%, but it also is in which levels of companies women are. So it's very important to have boards which include parity, gender parity between men and women.
Thank you. One more quick question. Where are these efforts typically housed within a multinational company? Corporate affairs, HR, corporate foundation, chief sustainability officers? What's your experience?
Right. Well, I mean, they are different. They are in different ways. Usually, they are not. I'm seeing more and more companies. They have within the HR. They have positions for diversity and inclusion. So there is specific within the HR. There is specific position and the person who is looking at that across the company. And they are tracking it. But this is the tracking and the monitoring part. What I believe that what needs to be done is to have this as a policy of the company, which of course comes from the board and the CEO and the management, to have the policy to achieve diversity and gender parity. And then you can have, of course, the positions which look at how this is being done. But I believe that the policies need to be devised in such a way to include women into the workforce, and to have such policies that would enable women to advance, and because of whatever private circumstances of each person is, that they should not have a negative impact on their careers. So I think that it's good to have a monitoring, but you really need to have policies set guidance, whether you call it policies or guiding principles or whatever the name is. It has to be set by the board and really proactively implemented by the CEOs through the HR, I would think, and the proactive policy to looking what kind of workforce you are recruiting.
Irena, one more question. Do civic groups like Rotary participate in the high-level political forum and other SDG ways?
Can you repeat it? You broke up. I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
Yes. Do civic groups like Rotary participate in the high-level political forum and other UN forums on the SDGs?
Who participates? Is that what you are asking?
The question is, do groups like Rotary
Okay, Rotary. Okay, yes, they do.
participate?
Yes, they do. They do participate, and we have different also foundations that participate. Philanthropy. We had for the first time last year we had a philanthropy event where there were a number of the groups that participate. So yes. We are trying to, at the high-level political forum, we are trying to reach out to all parts of society and to all groupings. So we have philanthropy, foundations, businesses, local authorities, local governments. We have, and then we of course have all the number of civil society stakeholders, where you have children, youth, women, farmers, trade unions, science. Researchers. So we are trying to get as wide as possible stakeholder engagement.
Thank you so much again, Irena. We want to move to one last slide. There's an opportunity to give us feedback on this call. Caroline, are you still on?
Yes, I am. Thank you. All right, everybody. If you are able to stay on for just another minute or two, we have 4 very short questions. And if you could go to www.menti.com, and you don't need a user sign-in, you don't need to create anything, you just log on to this site, and then the code that you enter is 926822. So again, if you could please go to Menti, www.menti.com, and then use the code 926822. Again, 926822. Looks like people are starting to log in. We'll give it a couple more seconds to get those numbers up. Again, the code 926822. 926822. All right, looks like now the numbers are starting to tick up. Great. For those of you that have been able to log in, you should be able to see the first question on your screen. How useful was the information presented today? And then you can go ahead and rate that and log your answer. For those still logging in, you go to www.menti.com and use the code 926822. Okay, again, the first question you should see on your screen, if it's on your computer or on your phone, how useful was the information presented today? I'm going to move to the next question. How satisfied are you with the event? And the scale is not satisfied to very satisfied. Excellent. Looks like we have quite a few responses. Great. Moving to the next question, what could have made the event better? And this is open text, so you can type in whatever recommendations or suggestions you have for anything we could have done to make the event better. Excellent. Getting some responses in. Going to give it another couple of seconds. It looks like more stuff is still coming in. Fantastic. Okay. And then we're going to move to the final question, which is, do you have any suggestions or recommendations for future events? So any topics that you may be interested in. I know for the CVC, we are likely going to be hosting some COVID-19 sessions, so talking about the local community and what are some of the things that are happening here and what might be some ways to get people engaged. So we're going to likely have a topic about that. We are also likely going to focus on some populations in volunteering. So how can we support virtual volunteering? How do you help people, once maybe we get past this COVID stuff, how do you engage people in different environments in your company? So maybe you have a corporate office, you might have some folks on a factory floor. How do you engage different types of folks? So we're open to any suggestions you have and certainly look to your input to help inform what it is that we're going to do in the future. So any suggestions are appreciated. Great, and while people are answering that, I'll just say a quick thank you then again. So thank you so much, Irena, for the informative presentation. Thank you, Mark and Global Minnesota, for bringing this opportunity to us and engaging our people in this presentation. Thanks, Dorsey, for hosting and making this possible. And I know, Mark, you mentioned a lot of different organizations at the beginning of the call, so certainly thank you to all of them as well. And thank you to all of you for participating and providing the feedback today. And I'll turn it over to Mark if you have additional closeout comments. Okay, it sounds like maybe he dropped. Well, thank you everybody so much for your time today. Appreciate it. And stay healthy and safe. And hopefully we'll be on a future webinar together soon. Thank you.
Thank you.